Hi, I'm Joe Finsternis, and tonight I'm going to talk to you about a movie called Exists. Now, this movie follows a group of friends who are going on a trip to a cabin in the woods, and while they're out there, they discover that Bigfoot may be out in the woods with him, and if he is, he's coming for them. Now, this movie is very similar to a film that I reviewed a few months ago called Willow Creek. Not only is it a Bigfoot movie, but it's shot to look like found footage. But when I heard a review for this film a while back, I heard that it had more of a payoff going for it, and I also heard going in that this was directed by the same guy who made the original Blair Witch Project, so clearly it was handled by someone who had experience in this subgenre, so I was looking forward to seeing it for sure, and the movie does live up to the expectations as far as, more of a payoff. It has way more monster action going for it. Like, there's this one shot early on in the film. I love the way that this was filmed in parts. There's this shot where where Bigfoot is walking by the group of friends in plain sight, and as I was watching the movie, I was so, focused on what was going on in the foreground that I didn't notice it at all. And then a few minutes later, when somebody was playing back that footage and paused it, you could see him right there. And there's just something really creepy about that when the enemy is in plain sight and you can't really see him at first. As far as the found footage aspect goes, though, it does suffer the same kind of weakness that most of these types of movies do, in that there were a couple of parts where I was wondering to myself, why doesn't the person holding the camera just put the camera down for a minute? Why is he even carrying it in the first place? Like, there were a few parts where it was necessary to have a camera. Like, there was a guy who was using night vision to see what he was doing and where he was going, but for the most part, the cameras just didn't feel necessary for the plot. But, and not only that, but the guy who had all the cameras, Brian, it felt like he had an unlimited amount of these things. Like, every time he lost one or left one behind, it felt like 2 or 3 more would take its place. It was like this guy was some kind of hydra of cameras. However, this didn't really do much to spoil my enjoyment of the film. The characters overall are pretty silly. Brian himself, the camera guy, is sort of this stoner character, which of course makes him the comedy relief for the film. And it never really feels like the comedy aspects get old, and it does help, when things start to escalate for this group of friends. I did feel genuinely upset for them because the film did set them up enough as being very likable. And it does have some really intense and creepy moments going for it, but as far as comparisons to Willow Creek go, it didn't scare me quite as much as that movie did. I just felt like Willow Creek was more grounded and atmospheric. And something funny actually happened a couple of days before I watched this film. I was out in the country with a friend. She was at the wheel. We were driving along this really shitty road out in the middle of the woods and ended up getting lost. And I kind of jokingly referred to it as Bigfoot country because the area reminded me of the woods in Willow Creek. And there was one point where she saw these trees moving in the distance. She said that the whole things were moving, and I said, maybe it's Bigfoot. And like an idiot, I pretty much ended up scaring myself because a few minutes later, I remembered how that movie made me feel, and I just started to think to myself, shit, I hope we don't end up being stuck out here when it gets dark. But that kind of speaks for how much of a psychological effect that film had on me. I will say this, though, for Exists, for the sheer entertainment value alone, I am more likely to rewatch this movie than Willow Creek, because it is way more fun to sit down and watch. So if you're looking for just a cool, entertaining monster movie with plenty of action going for it, then Exists may be right up your alley. In fact, I would suggest treating yourself to a double feature one night and watching Willow Creek and Exist back to back. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about this movie. I hope you all have a good one.